anyhow. So we then felt we couldn't afford to waste the lives of these young people. And we then changed the strategy and the tactics uh, of the opposition. Uh, what's happening in Europe and in Israel are two totally different things from what happened in Nadeko. Nobody's gunning them down. Yes, the police are there, and there are clashes with the police in Israel and in France, but nobody's gunning them down. The lesson we should learn from this, especially for an incoming administration in Nigeria, as well as for other African governments who are going to have to face the same tough decisions that we will need to face for structural adjustment in Africa, is that the people must be prepared to face down government, and the government must not respond by calling out the military. But there has to be sincerity in this. I recall about 10 years ago in Nigeria, when the government of President Jonathan decided that it was going to, I'm not sure whether it was withdraw or reduce subsidy. You know, people who should know better and who are now themselves advocating removal of subsidy got people onto the streets in Lagos to demonstrate against the removal of subsidy. It became like a carnival. Nollywood actors and actresses were showing up every day to address the crowd about why subsidy should be kept. And finally, the police were sent in, and the surprising thing was it was not even a riotous crowd like what you've seen in France, where there were tires burning on the streets almost every day. In the Nigerian experiment, which I'm referring to, tires were not being burnt on the street. There was no violence, but when the police were sent in, there were clashes with the police, gunshots, were fired, and the people immediately dispersed. Now, the lesson I'm raising is, if you believe in what you are demonstrating for or against, be prepared to face down the government. I mean, the demonstrations in France has been going on now for about a month. The one in Israel has been going on for, I think, about 3 weeks. And they said that they are not going to back down. The government also has said it's not going to change its mind. But if you believe in what you are demonstrating for, and you think it is critical for your life, the life of the nation, the life of your children, then hold your ground. But then the same thing goes for the government. The government should simply not, change its position just because there are demonstrators on the street. I remember quite clearly the speech by Macron 2 days ago. He said, like my predecessors before me, I could have simply kicked the can down the road, sweep this problem under the carpet for the next administration, because I'm not going to run again. So I'm not looking for popularity. I would rather do the right thing and be unpopular. And what is the right thing? He simply says the French government cannot sustain the pension scheme. Too many people were retiring at the age of 62, and not enough people were earning salaries to be taxed so that pension can be paid. And he was asking for the retirement age to be raised to 64. I mean, there are countries where retirement age is 65 or 70, and nobody is, dying on the street for that. And I'm on the side of Macron on this. In the case of Israel, I think the stubbornness of Netanyahu is unacceptable to me, given the issue that is at stake. You cannot, I don't know of any country in the world where parliament is given the power to overturn rulings of the Supreme Court by one vote. That to me is dictatorship. In fact, fascism. Let's call it spade a spade. It is fascism. But the point I want to make is the street, which I will call street democracy, the street refuses to back down. Young men, old men, women, grandfathers, even little kids are being carried to these demonstrations. And so for African governments, don't allow yourself to be bullied by the street if you know changes need to be made. Changes are often unpopular, but if you believe it's the right thing, then stand your ground. But the same advice goes for those who are prepared to demonstrate, to call attention to maybe the like this subsidy in Nigeria. It's been there for so long, it hasn't served the purpose that it's supposed to serve. It has simply created millionaires who have not earned the money, but have through all kinds of shenanigans been the beneficiary of the subsidies. And I hope some people will be sensible enough to educate the trade unions. Of course, most of the leaders of the trade unions are also millionaires now. How millionaires can say they are leaders of the trade union. But the point is, there is going to be confrontation between government and the people. Government should refrain from using the police or the army to quell demonstrations, but the demonstrators, if they believe in what is the source of their angst, should also stay their ground. This is, to me, the takeaway from the demonstrations we are seeing in France and in Israel.
Sir, but someone might say, just to pick something you touched on there, the age from 62 to 64. There is a school of thought that says the challenge is not necessarily the change of the age from 62 to 64, 65, or whatever they decide to change it to. The challenge was the way in which the change was being introduced into the government. So that's number one. And then number two, sir, is who then mediates between the street demonstrators and the government if everybody is holding up and they're saying, we're going to wait this out and see who is going to back down first? You know, almost like a poker game of sorts, and see who is going to blink first. And I think you've said maybe once on this program or so that the longer the demonstration goes on for, the less likely it may be that the demonstrators will get their outcome. I'm not sure if it was you that said it, but I'll put that to you, sir, and see what your view is.
The answer to your first question is Macron still acted constitutionally. The Constitution allowed him to bring in this reform by decree, rather than through the vote of the French National Assembly. He still acted constitutionally. Also, even the Netanyahu government in Israel is still going through parliamentary motions. So it's also not going in through the back door. The constitution, where Israel has no constitution, but the convention allows him to do what he's trying to do. That doesn't make it right, but the constitution or the convention allows him to do that. Number two, who blinks first? Well, that's the nature of politics. One has to face down the other. That's the nature of politics. It's not a question of some clerics coming in to try and negotiate. You can't negotiate, between two competing rights. The street demonstrators believe they are right, sufficiently right, that they are prepared to demonstrate for weeks and months. And in the case of France, you could say the confrontation with the police. I'm not just calling out France. There are other countries in Europe and in South America that demonstrations go on for months. The government also does not want to back down just as soon as somebody says boo, for them to run away. So it is a competition of will. That is also the nature of politics. And the chances are that somewhere along the line, both government and the street demonstrators will reach out for a compromise. Remember, in the case of Israel, even the president, and this was unprecedented in the history of Israel, came out and came up with a package compromise. It was Netanyahu who rejected that compromise. So, Once I was talking on this program about my visit to Israel when I was a minister, because we didn't have diplomatic relations with Israel at that time. It was a clandestine visit. So the Mossad was my guest. And I recall the conversation because it was, my visit was during the time when the Knesset was having one of its riotous, debates, fighting was going on, that some people were determined that the Knesset would not meet, and this and that. And well, I took it as a joke, but the two Mossad agents said there would be nothing better than just for us to march down to this parliament and lock all of them up. They're making fun of democracy, and they are toying with the rights of Israel, and we all just laughed. Obviously, they didn't mean it, or they meant it, but it wasn't something that was going to be actualized. But that has stuck. That thought has stuck with me. And when I see Air Force men and military men joining the demonstrators in Israel, and I just wondered what will happen if the police, who so far are the ones confronting the policemen, kill a soldier in the confrontation. What will happen within the security forces and security elements? So it's a question of who blinks first. I mean, obviously, the streets cannot be paralyzed forever, but I have no idea for how long it will last. There was a third issue you raised, I can't remember now.
No, that is based on what you said. There is a question I want to put to you that should probably supersede that. Talking about the game of politics and who blinks first. In the last few months in Nigeria, we saw things about politics that maybe we could almost regard as unprecedented. We saw people coming out, everybody was going in a certain direction, announcements were made left, right, and center, and some people have been hurt, depending on which side of the divide one is on. I'm sure you must have, as a political scientist, there are some lessons that one can pick out of the Nigerian story and the Nigerian situation. And I'm sure our viewers would like to hear some of your thoughts about how this game has played out.
What game? What game?
I would call it the game of politics, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know what you, you have been cagey in your choice of words in what you are referring to. And I just want you to be specific so that I will know what answer to give.
Okay, let me put it this way, sir. We had the Labour Party, we had the PDP, we had the APC. From whichever of those parties the vast majority of the people belong to, I am sure that they would look back, if they were doing a lessons learned process, they would look back and think about what worked, what didn't work, what they may want to change for the future. So from your position, sir, what would you say that worked, but that one didn't work, so that we could learn from it for the future?
You've just gone round the circle by not putting your finger on what you want. So no, and I'm not going to help you out by assuming that I know what you have in mind, for me to then react to that. So what do you have in mind? What are you referring to specifically?
The announcement by INEC, number one, and the declaration. Obviously, the case is in court, being discussed, and petitions are now going out. What do we learn from that?
So you are referring to the election. And my answer would be, the case is in court. Let us give the judiciary an opportunity to do their job. INEC has done its own job. The politicians have done their own job. Those of us who are the citizens have done our job. And there are grievances. Fortunately, our law provides for how these grievances should be resolved. And I'm eternally grateful to our leaders, because they are still our leaders, have decided to obey the law by going to court. We would then just have to wait and allow the courts to do their job, rather than second guessing what the judiciary will do.
All right, sir. Let me go to, before I leave Africa, there is a point I want to bring up. We touched on it a while ago, but that was the issue of the United Kingdom and their controversial law around deporting refugees to Rwanda. And now it seems like the EU courts are starting to take sides with the United Kingdom. And it seems like those flights may be resuming at the end of the day to go to Rwanda from the United Kingdom. How do you react to the new development now?
It was wrong. It was racist. It was unbecoming the first time it was introduced. It is still wrong. It is still racist. And it is still unbecoming of the United Kingdom. Nothing has happened to make me change my mind. If anything, the disparity in the way they treated the Ukrainian refugees, and the way they are treating the Afghanistan, the Iraqis, the Syrians, just reinforces my initial predisposition, especially, and one must not be tired of repeating this, the deluge of Afghanistan, Iraqi, Syrians, and what have you, were caused by an invasion of their countries by these same countries that are now denying them entry. They were caused. If outside countries. And it's not just the United States alone. I mean, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan first. So they're all guilty of that. Even under the guise of the Arab Spring, the Western countries stimulated, let me call that, or inspired or instigated, revolutions, riots, and what have you in the Arab countries. In the case of Syria, they set up their own anti. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the governments of these countries were angels. They were not angels, they were dictators. But it was not in the business of NATO countries to have gone into Libya, to have gone into Syria, to have gone into Iraq. That's none of their business. And what they did, I mean, there is a program on the BBC that I saw the other day saying they went to Iraq to remove the government there without a plan for what will replace that government. So the instability which they bred in Iraq, we are still living with it today. So they caused the problem of the refugees, and now they are shutting the door against them and saying they will take them to Rwanda. As I said, it was wrong at the beginning. Now it is still wrong.
Thank you, sir. Let me go to Russia, sir. We saw the surprise visit of the Japanese Prime Minister to Ukraine. In some way, some have referred to it as the Japanese now taking sides with Ukraine, as China has taken sides with Russia. What's your view on that visit by the Japanese premier to Ukraine, sir?
It's a very significant visit, probably for reasons not well articulated, because this marks a fundamental reversal of the post-Second World War syndrome of Japanese foreign policy. Because of the lessons learned at the Second World War, Japan has been a pacifist country, both in terms of their military equipment, both in terms of the disposition of this military, but also in terms of the involvement, or should one say non-involvement, of the Japanese government in crisis and conflict areas. I will say, and fortunately, practically all our members here are intellectuals, so they can fact check me and correct me, and I always welcome correction. But I will say this will be the first time that a Japanese prime minister will visit a conflict zone since the end of the Second World War. And it's rather significant that this conflict zone is in Europe. are not in Asia. Ever since the United States had invited Japan to attend the summit of NATO as a friend of NATO, the significance of that invitation and the attendance of that conference actually well, let me put it, in this polite way, marks a reversal of post-World War II Japanese posture, because they are now being dragged out of Asia into Europe. And I'm not sure that after all this is over, they'll be asked to please go back home and stay within the bottle of Asia. Events have consequences, and these consequences seldom reverse themselves. So the visit by the Japanese Prime Minister is a highly significant one.
So there's a question here. This person wants to know that since we talk about street democracy, and they're referring to the situation in Kenya, where the losing candidate, Odinga, has really been a sort of spearhead in calling for these protests. And he's also asked that the protests should continue weekly going forward, protesting high cost of living. This person wants to know, at what point does the opposition become someone standing in the way of progress versus fighting legitimately for something that really moves the nation forward? Because in this particular case, it looks like Odinga should maybe just let Ruto lead without being obstructive in his approach.
Well, I think there are two things we need to sort out on that. One is Odinga's sponsoring of these street demonstrators as a result of his still refusal to accept the result of the last election. I would say that's wrong. The Supreme Court had ruled, as I was saying earlier on in response to your question on Nigeria, the process has been followed and the Supreme Court has ruled, and there has to come to an end. But if the street demonstrations are as a result of opposition to government policies dealing with, development in Kenya, policies that are supposed to move Kenya forward, and the disagreement is on that. That to me will fit the model of street democracy. And, unless I'm going to contradict myself, the street democracy will continue until, I hope, until the government blinks or until the street demonstrators blink. That they are being sponsored by Odinga, create some form of legitimacy, problem of legitimacy for the street demonstrators themselves. Because are they now being used for political purposes, or are the street demonstrations targeting specific policy of government. If they are being used for political purposes, well, that to me would be a negative use of street democracy. But if it's against a specific government policy, whether it is taxation, whether it is subsidy, whether it is allocation of budgetary or whether it is the dispensation of budgetary allocations, that to me will be legitimate for you to demonstrate that more money should be spent on school children rather than on the military, that more money should be spent on health, on hospitals, than say on tourism or whatever it is. That to me would be legitimate.
So there's another question here, but this takes us back to the Russia-Ukrainian war. Actually, two questions. One is your reaction to the ICC effectively asking for the Russian president to be arrested for war crimes, and what that means in practice for him, and to what effect that would help anything given the current situation. So that's number one. And then the second point here is the Russian government now saying that given the caliber of the weapons that the United Kingdom is giving to Ukraine, that very gently, very silently, entry-level nuclear weapons are now being provided. And on the basis of that, the foreign governments and allies of Ukraine are now starting to open the door for the stronger weapons to be used in the process. What is your take on those two questions, sir?
I was actually expecting the ICC question as a major question in the course of our program. When I had it, I had to say, I had to kick myself. You must be kidding me. A warrant of arrest against the president of a superpower, the president of a nuclear power. You got to be kidding. It's never happened before. That is not to say it shouldn't happen, but how are you going to enforce it? That's number one. The hypocrisy surrounding this whole issue is one that I cannot stomach. The American president is now welcoming it. The same United States that refused to sign the Rome Charter that brought the International Criminal Court into existence for fear that because of its own war-driven foreign policy, its soldiers and its political leaders may actually run the risk of being targeted by the ISIS. The same United States that will not even allow its soldier, an ordinary private, to be investigated by the ICC, is now gloating that the ICC issued a warrant for the arrest of the Russian president. The former Austrian foreign minister had said that actually the ICC was pressured by Western countries to issue that warrant at the time it was issued, because it was issued on the eve of the visit of the Chinese president to Russia. So the ICC itself, foolishly, in my point of view, has just made an enemy of China. Let us clear a few of the grounds. Putin has behaved abominably, obnoxiously, really, criminally, in the way he had waged the war against Ukraine. So let's not beat about the bush. Let this not be interpreted as a defense of Putin. The article under which he has been charged is deportation of children from war zone to Russia to be Russified, to be turned, not to be protected, to be turned into Russians, to be taught how to speak Russian, to be taught the Russian national anthem. They've been embedded in Russian homes. That's criminal under international law. So there's no defense of Putin. And in a way, Putin really needs to know that there is a limit to his criminal behavior, a limit. Even if there's nothing the world can do about it, except to say, you're a criminal. We will call you out. Now, yes, I have said it cannot be, the ICC warrant cannot be implemented. That's partially true, because it limits actually the countries that he can visit. He can visit the countries of his allies. He can visit. China. He can visit Pakistan. Can he visit Brazil? He will have to give it a lot of thought. And Lula, president of Brazil, will have to be consulted. Can he visit India? Again, the same diplomatic to and fro will have to take place. Can he visit South Africa? Recall that South Africa actually almost got into trouble over the president of Sudan, who also was under an ICC warrant. And he went to visit South Africa. And there was enormous pressure on South Africa to arrest him. And finally, he left before the conference was over through surreptitious routes. Now, these are not the kinds of things that a president wants to go through. At the end of the day, Brazil may say, well, there's very little I can do, you know. He is the president of a foreign bank, but he has gone through the shame of being called out. He will have gone through the shame of negotiating what should really be a straightforward thing. Now, let's even push this argument further. Can he go, supposing there's a UN conference, supposing there's a UN conference in France, in England, in London, will he be able to attend? And all heads of states are supposed to attend. Will he be able to attend? You know, we are now in uncharted territory. Those of us who are in this field, because I don't know. Because if he insists that he will attend a conference in Paris or in London and his plane takes off, well, the French could simply refuse overflight rights and landing rights, which would be a clever way of going around to that. But supposing he says, I am coming. If you like, arrest me. Then what is going to happen? The United Nations annual the General Assembly session starting in September. Now, the United States, under its obligation, under international law, cannot prevent any head of state from attending that conference because it's not an American conference, it's a United Nations conference. And the fact that the United Nations is based in New York does not confer on the United States any right to. But all member states of the ICC are under an obligation to carry out the implementation of a warrant of the ICC. All of them are under that obligation, and that obligation overrides the immunity of heads of states. The only thing is America is not a member of the ICC. It has not signed its charter. Russia itself is not a member of ICC, doesn't sign the charter. Even Ukraine is not a member of the ICC because it hasn't signed this charter. So they can then use this as the clever cover for not touching him. But there is no doubt that this is a major introduction into international law as regards immunity of presidents and heads of states.
Before you answer the second question, sir, about the depleted uranium ammunitions the UK is supplying to Ukraine, how exactly do you arrest the president of a country without it being a formal declaration of war?
Well, that's what the Russians have said that it will be a declaration of war for you to arrest their heads of state. And you see, and when you see the heavy, I mean, we're not talking about the security detail that surrounds, government of Gambia, the president of Gambia, or the president of Bhutan. Then when you see the security detail that surrounds the Russian president or the American president, that is actually where the war will start. I'm sure over 50 dead bodies will lay around if you try to forcefully arrest him, unless it is an arranged process. So let's not, no, I just think that we should evaluate the warrant in terms of the moral impact. I mean, come on, let us face it. This is a major, a grave insult meted out to Russia, meted out to Putin. And we are talking about a country, I'm talking about Russia now, where the culture lays a lot of emphasis on respect. That cultural value has just been dented. It's not just Putin who's been insulted. Russia has been insulted. They're not likely to forget this very easily. It has made, and don't forget also what I said about issuing it on the eve of the visit of China. China has also been insulted. The President Xi of China has also been insulted by this move. Just how useful is what ICC has done? I think it was an ill-advised move. I think that's my final word on this. An ill-advised move, and it's not going to do anybody any good. As regards to your second question, all countries use spent uranium to the tip of their artillery shells, the tip of their tank shells, and so on. It's not a nuclear weapon. It is spent. It has no cognitive nuclear value, but it strengthens, the tip of the bullet, the tip of the shell coming forward, the tip of the, it strengthens it. It does not even, when it lands, there's no nuclear particles flying around. However, because it is called spent nuclear weapon, people tend to forget the adjective spent, and they just wake up and stir up the horrors of nuclear. From Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we human beings have had this, horror about nuclear weapons, anything nuclear. But they use it even in X-ray. There are a lot of hospital equipment where spent nuclear particles are used. It does not mean that nuclear, but of course, Russia and China are running away with it now to say, well, you are the ones introducing nuclear weaponry into the field, not us. But that's not true.
Sorry, sir, I'm going to ask you one last question about Israel and the United States. We know that the United States has always been in support of Israel, most of the time anyway. But recently, with the visit of, I think it was the defense secretary to Israel recently, he had to meet with Netanyahu in the airport. He couldn't get into town because of the protests and things like that. And the US spoke publicly about the issues that were going on. And I think you even mentioned it at the time, sir, that it was a public show from the United States. Now the US is also going against Israel regarding some of the provisions in their settlement laws that they want to pass and put in place. Are we starting to see a decline in the relationship between the US and Israel?
No, they are not. If the United States wants to stop Israel dead in its tracks, it knows what to do. It will simply withdraw the monthly budgetary subsidy that it gives Israel. Without that subsidy, Israel cannot survive 3 months. It will go bankrupt. But America will not do that. And definitely not with elections coming next year and the power of the Israeli, what's the word now? Anyway, the Israelis have a very powerful lobby in the United States. And no sitting American president is going to run the risk of that lobby turning against it, especially when the likely opponent, Trump, is regarded as a friend of Israel that will do anything for Israel. That will affect the votes in the presidential election forthcoming. So, no, the United States will make all the noise, but all that noise, especially with somebody like Netanyahu, will come to nothing. Recall that Trump moved American embassy to Jerusalem. Biden said he was going to reverse that. He has not done so. Maybe he's waiting for his second term, but he hasn't done so. So I think we are just seeing a lot of movement, a lot of noise on the part of the Americans, but to amount to nothing.
Thank you very much, sir. We have run out of time tonight, but we'll be back same time next week. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you to our viewers. Do have a good evening. Thank you, sir. And good night all.